Welcome, my friends, to a new episode of TEFL Insider. Actually, this series of videos is designed to support our TEFL candidates studying for training qualifications UK Level 5 certificate in teaching English as a foreign language. Lovely. So, now I decided to start this series with some videos about the course assignments, and in this episode we're going to talk about assignment 1, and then I'm going to continue these episodes covering all assignments inshallah, and then we're going to talk also about other elements of our TEFL course at Britishey. Lovely. So assignment 1, let's have a look at the whole assignment and think about all elements inside this assignment. So as you see, my friends, we've got 5 main parts in this assignment. We've got part 1, that should be finished on 250 words. We have also part 2, 250 words as well. And then we have part 3, which is a kind of a recording from 3 to 5 minutes. Okay? And then we have part 4, where you're going to design a timeline or PowerPoint slides. And then finally, part 5, where you need to design 2 charts and follow that with an essay. And we're going to talk about all these parts in this episode, right? So let's go to part 1. And it says, write about the diverse aspects of the English speaking world. And then we have choose at least 2 countries for each of the following categories. So we have here native, primary, secondary, business language. And what do we mean by that? Countries where English is a native language, countries where English is a primary language, secondary language, business language. That's what we mean. And then it says, mention regions or international bodies where English is a recognized language. And then, document the historical and cultural significance of English in these areas, including images that capture unique linguistic elements, popular phrases or accents. And finally, incorporate interviews or testimonials in person or online with native, fluent or proficient speakers, gathering insights into the importance of English in their lives or professions. Lovely. So, again, now let me show you that in a more organized way so that you know exactly what you need to write in the assignment. Let's have a look. So, we have 8 countries to write about. 2 about each of these categories. So I need 2 countries where English is a native language, 2 countries where English is a primary language, 2 countries where English is a secondary language, and 2 countries where English is a business language. And while writing, you need to cover 3 main points: regions or international bodies where English is a recognized language, cultural and historical significance, interviews or testimonials. And these interviews don't have to be with native speakers. They can be also with proficient speakers. So people who are non-native, but they're proficient. Okay, their level of English is really, really high. Right. So I say, Shadi, and we're going to run these interviews. Yes, and you're going to write about, okay, the information you got from these interviews and integrate that in writing about those 8 countries. Now, my advice here is when you answer your assignment, you have to be very organized. So we need a title that says part 1. Okay? And then go with a title native countries. And then 2 bullet points where you have the 2 countries. And under each country, you see what you're going to write about that. And then again, subheading for primary, subheading for secondary, subheading for business language, and make sure that under each subheading you have 2 bullet points for 2 countries and some information about these countries. Okay, so that is for part 1. Now, what references can you use? And as you see on a screen, you can use the TEFL handbook, or you can use English as a Global Language by David Crystal. This is also a good reference on that. Lovely. So then we move to part 2. And we have in part 2, 250 words. And it says, part 2, select examples in the fields of business, education, culture, politics, or entertainment, highlighting the impact of English on global communication, partnerships, and understandings. Okay, lovely. Right, now, so let's see this in a more organized way. So you need now examples from business, education, culture, politics, and entertainment. What do you mean examples? You can think of a successful character for each of those categories, or maybe a successful company for each of these 5 fields: business, education, culture, politics, entertainment, right? Think about, for example, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Originally is not a native, right? I guess he's from Austria, right? And then he became very successful, right? Now, how did English help him become successful? So that sort of thinking. And while you're talking about characters and examples in those 5 fields, you need to cover global communication, partnerships, and understanding. Okay? Now, let's move to references. And again, you can use the same 2 previous references, the TEFL handbook and David Crystal, English as a Global Language. Right. Then we move to part 3. Now, part 3 is just 3 to 5 minute recording. But the question, recording about what? That is the question. Let's read. Interview a non-native English speaker from Egypt. Okay? Or if you're based in a different country, from the country where you live. Focusing on her motivations and aspirations for learning English. So it's so simple. All what you need is you have your mobile and you record this interview. Okay? You interview maybe one of your students, okay, but you make sure that the interview would last for at least 3 minutes, maximum 5 minutes. And then you take that recording and you submit it. So that recording is a kind of an interview, talking with that student about why he studies English or she studies English, and their aspiration and that sort of thing. So again, so we talked about 3 parts now. The first part, 250 words. Second part, 250 words. Third part, just a recording. Let's go to the 4th part. And the 4th part is actually about designing a timeline or designing PowerPoint slides. Okay, it says, track the development of English from its Indo-European roots, its emergence as a Germanic language, to the significant influence of Romance languages. Second point, highlight key historical events, language shifts, and cultural connections that have shaped English. So this is mainly about history of English language. Now, someone might say, Shadi, what's a timeline? A timeline looks like this. Like what you see on the screen now is the timeline of the history of French language. And look at this. So we have, for example, Gaulish language, and we have Gallo-Romance, and then we have Old French, and then we have Middle French, and then we have Early Modern French, and then we have Classical Modern French, and then we have Present Day or Contemporary French. And then on the other side, you have dates. That's what we want you to do. We want you to study the development of English language and design your own timeline or PowerPoint slides that show how English has developed over the years. Right? Now, what sources can you use for that purpose? We have wonderful resources here. and references. You've got the TEFL handbook as well. You've got the history of the English language. You've got the stories of English by David Crystal. You have a history of the English language. You've got also a little book of language by David Crystal. You have a history of the English language by Van Gilderen. And then we have the story of English in 100 words by David Crystal. And finally, Inventing English, a portable history of the language by Seth Lura. Okay. So these are some of the references that you can use in order to answer this part of the assignment. Now we come to part 5, and in part 5 you need to write 500 words. And I can say that, let's read it first and then we'll talk about how to address part 5 in the assignment. So we have here, analyzing key components of the following teaching methodologies. That's part 1. Behaviorism, audiolingualism, the natural way, and humanistic approaches. Through 3 things: role-playing, designing lesson plans, or adapting classroom activities. And then second part, evaluating the merits and limitations of each method, considering factors such as age, cultural background, learning objectives, and learning preferences. Finally, crafting a tailored teaching approach that incorporates aspects of multiple methodologies with a focus on addressing individual learner needs and contexts. So, how do we address this? My advice, my friends, is to answer point 1 and point 2 in charts and point number 3 in essay. So let's have a look at what I mean. Part 1. The chart, as you see, will have these 4 areas: behaviorism, audiolingualism, the natural way, and then humanistic approaches. And then you talk about each one in terms of role play, lesson planning, adapted activities. Talk about the features of each one. Okay? Now, when you answer in a chart like this, you guarantee that you're not going to miss anything. Okay? Cool. Right. Now let's move to the second part. And the second part is a chart as well. And we have the same, okay, methods there. But we have now merits and limitations. So what you need to do is to write the merits of each method or each approach, and also the limitations of each method or approach. And then we come to the last part. Now, when we come to the last part, now this is about writing an essay. Now, in order to write this essay, you need to use the merits you have gathered from all these methods and write an essay about how you will integrate all these effective aspects in your context and in the light of your students' needs. So, for example, I go to the merits of behaviorism, audiolingualism, the natural way, humanistic approaches. And inside humanistic approaches, we have the desuggestopedia, total physical response, the silent way, community language learning, all these methods. Right. Now, where are we going to get information about all this from? Now, you have the references here. So we have, again, your TEFL handbook. You have the natural approach by Tracy Tyrrell and Stephen Krashen. You have behaviorism. You have humanistic approaches and empirical view. You have techniques and principles in language, teaching by Diane Larson, Freeman and Marty Anderson. And you've got Scott Thornberry's 30 language teaching methods. So you can use these references, my friends, in order to answer part 5 of the assignment. So we came to the end of this episode, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. That was TEFL Insider, Shadi Abu Yusuf. Until we meet again. Assalamu alaikum. Bye-bye.